Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from B. Marshy, who asked, "Hey Thor, I just watched an interesting video essay, I'll leave a link below for anyone interested, which explores the current state of modern Star Wars. Essentially, the core premise of the essay is that the Jedi have made a shift from mythological archetypes to being more like a sociological reflection of our own world, and that ever since this shift occurred in The Last Jedi, the franchise has been stuck in this dilemma of whether to explore the Jedi in a more critical light that serves as an allegory for real-world problems like the Acolyte, or going all in on the nostalgia factor and having the Jedi be nothing but spectacle with little to no substance like the Kenobi series or the Ahsoka series, although I personally have no issue with the latter of those two series. My question is, do you think that we are in desperate need of more mythological storytelling in the modern world? Most movies and TV shows seem to want to critique society in one way or another, and although this works well in Star Wars 2, as we saw with Andor, I think there needs to be a balance between mythology and sociology in Star Wars, where the storylines that have a more grounded tone, like Andor and Mando, can explore the nuances of morality in Star Wars, but the Jedi should always be there as an ideal to strive towards. That doesn't mean the Jedi can never have nuance, but I just think that anytime a franchise like Star Wars tries to reintroduce that element of mythology, it is criticized for being purely nostalgia bait rather than seeing it as a story that is meant to inspire with universal themes and life lessons for everyone. What do you think? Do you think Star Wars needs to embrace its mythological roots? Or do you think it should explore the more complex topics like in Andor? Or do you agree that we need a balance of the two, and that Star Wars is the perfect franchise to do that with? Would love to hear your thoughts and keep up the great work. And this is a very interesting question and a difficult one because a lot of people have a lot of different takes or opinions about what exactly Star Wars even is in the first place, or what it should be, or just what exactly it is that makes something Star Wars at all, or what makes something not Star Wars or not Star Wars enough, or just not a good fit for the franchise. An example of this would be Andor, where some fans will say it absolutely is not Star Wars for this reason or that, while others will say it hits all the themes of Star Wars perfectly, even if it doesn't have lightsabers and all that, and it hits it better than most anything else Star Wars ever has before, and that it is the best thing Star Wars to come out since maybe The Empire Strikes Back. And I'm, of course, one of those fans who thinks Andor is one of the best things Star Wars ever, period. Though if you would have told me about it going into it, or told me what it was going to be like before I ever saw it, I may have been rather skeptical about how Star Wars-y I would think it would end up being. That maybe this is a bit too much of a departure from certain aspects of Star Wars that are much more familiar and almost feel like they need to be in there to make something Star Wars. Stuff like, again, the Jedi and lightsabers and big space battles and all that sort of thing. And so I do understand people who don't like Andor because it doesn't have any of those things. Either way, and at the same time, I've also enjoyed something like Skeleton Crew, which is, in some ways, you could certainly argue, it's the exact opposite of Andor. Skeleton Crew is a good Star Wars show in a totally different way, or for totally different reasons than Andor, and yet I would consider both to be good Star Wars. Which has then told me, going back to your question, or convinced me, someone who in the past has been a little skeptical about what kinds of stories Star Wars should or should not tell, but liking both shows has convinced me that Star Wars can indeed be many, many different things. That yeah, there probably should be a balance or variety in terms of tone or type of content it makes, or types of stories it tells and the way it tells them. That sometimes it can lean into more mythological elements or just tell a more fun story with, sure, a good life lesson in there, especially for younger people like Skeleton Crew did. And other times it can all but ignore that mythological side and be a bit gritty and have something to say about the nature of war like Andor did, or about humanity itself, or how good people have to deal with evil and how that can get messy when you do, that it is not always easy to fight against the bad guys, because the bad guys are going to do some shady things, and you might have to do some shady things to counter them. Though honestly, I do think Star Wars should maybe err on the mythological side, even if people want to say it's being nostalgia baity or whatever they want to say, that you just keep going back to the Jedi and the Force because you want people to watch it because they like that sort of thing, and you really don't have anything to say. Though if you do want to use the Jedi and lightsabers, you really should have something to say. I'm not defending just using it for the sake of using it. I'm saying lean into that stuff, but make sure you have something of substance underneath it. But anyway, I do think Star Wars should, again, err more on the side of mythological, meaning I think more often than not, it should not necessarily include the Jedi, but go with more traditional storytelling, and yeah, include mystical aspects like the Force and all that. If you get too far away from that too often, if suddenly everything is just like Andor, and mind you again, I love Andor, I do think you could potentially lose, or almost certainly eventually will lose, that Star Wars-y feeling, I think. Though that said, one thing I really appreciated about Andor is that it didn't bring the Jedi in and sort of muddy the waters with them like it did for maybe some other aspects of Star Wars. Again, going back to how sometimes the good guys have to do some really bad things to defeat evil. And certain other Star Wars shows and movies have not shied away from bringing in the Jedi and showing them in this more negative light, shall we say, here in the Disney era. Which you're free to enjoy if you want, but it kind of seems silly for them to do, to frequently be deconstructing the Jedi, to keep calling into question the very foundation of Star Wars itself, I think. To be critiquing and pulling apart that one thing that is more synonymous or symbolic and crucial to the success of your franchise than anything else. To be blunt, I don't know why Disney or Lucasfilm has let so many creators come in to crap on the one thing that, to most people out there, is the very heart and soul of Star Wars, that of course being the Jedi. Which, no, isn't to say that I don't think we should ever look upon the Jedi with a more critical eye, to give a more nuanced take in regards to them. Nothing should be beyond reproach. Or that I think every single Jedi is or always should be perfect or presented as perfect or near perfect, that we can't ever see a bad Jedi or one go bad. I mean, George Lucas himself certainly showed us in the prequels that a Jedi can go bad. Nor am I saying from the outside looking in that we here in the real world can't ever have a spirited debate about certain aspects of the Jedi Order that maybe seem questionable in regards or in relation to the real world. But I do think the Jedi in story and on the whole should always be sort of an ideal to strive towards for us here in the real world. That we should look upon them as an example that can help us be a bit more kind and selfless in our own lives. That they should always be the moral foundation or moral compass of the franchise. And that this need or desire to, in story, continually question them or to portray them or what they believe or how they operate as flawed and wrong overall is a disservice to the story of Star Wars and a disservice to the message it is trying to convey, especially again to younger people. It is all a disservice to what George Lucas created Star Wars for in the first place, which was, as I was just kind of saying, it was to inspire young people, to show the Jedi as a source of good and how to be selfless, which was really what the original trilogy focused on, or how it portrayed the Jedi. While in the prequels, they were still the good guys, absolutely, and they were very well-meaning and they did what they thought was right or what they had to do given the situation that Palpatine and the Sith had kind of forced them into. But it was also meant to be a cautionary tale with them in the prequels, that even the best of us must always remain vigilant and on guard, or we can fall prey to evil from without and or arrogance from within, and when it's both, well, bad things happen for everyone, or in the case of the prequels, for the galaxy itself. And I really do think if you steer too far away from all of this, with the Jedi being the moral compass of Star Wars, if you will, if you constantly show them in not necessarily flat out bad or negative ways, but show that so many Jedi are corrupt or the organization or order itself has all these major issues or flaws and it partakes in major cover-ups of bad things, that maybe they're not the good guys after all, well, that is the one thing you can do, or one of the things you can do. There are certainly others, but it's probably the top thing you can do to, in my opinion, make something not Star Wars anymore. I think if you're constantly calling into question the morality of the Jedi Order because you want to make a point about the world today, or you're always showing Jedi who do nothing but make mistakes or go bad, you're going against the whole point of Star Wars in the first place. And I really do think the smartest thing Disney could do with Star Wars is really go out of your way to make the Jedi heroic again. To go out of their way to give us some truly positive Jedi stories where they are the good guys, they're doing the right things, and they're facing evil and ultimately prevailing. And yes, they have done some of that for sure. I'm not saying everything Disney has done with Star Wars has been against the Jedi, but enough of it has been that, in my opinion, it's really damaged their franchise by casting a shadow upon the light at the center of it. Furthermore, yes, I also know they do have plans for more Jedi content. We're supposedly, we'll believe it when we see it, but we're supposedly getting a Rey New Jedi Order movie as well as a Dawn of the Jedi movie. And as I've discussed elsewhere, my fear is that they'll change the Jedi to some extent in these films. Change to some degree or in some capacity what they believe now or what they have always believed or originally believed, or they will change what they represent or how they act. That balance will be somewhere between the darkness and the light, and the Jedi will have figured this out again after initially figuring it out way back in the day, which, no, is not how it all works, according to George Lucas. And if they do that, if they decide to reshape the Jedi in a new image, one to fit the modern world potentially, I think that truly will be the end of Star Wars. That'll be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of the fans who are kind of hanging on and haven't been happy with what Disney has done, but have hope that it will get better some way, somehow. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will try to get the Jedi right and show them as they should be, as George Lucas intended them to be. And this, the Rey movie and the Dawn of the Jedi movie, will bring the Jedi back to glory, assuming people actually go to see a movie about Rey, which is a potentially whole different kind of mistake or problem they have, but we won't get into that here. Either way, and going along with all of this, my next project, what I'm working on right now, along with some other stuff, I'm always working on like 10 things, which is why nothing ever gets done, but it's a new series of videos based off my idea from a while back now, my idea of doing videos that kind of ask the question, what would the Jedi or a Jedi do in a certain moral difficult situation? And I'm going to do it in story form using my own new characters and all that. It's basically going to be a story of a Jedi and his Padawan trying to let the Force guide them across the galaxy to where they are needed. And I currently have the first episode written and an overall outline for the series completed, because there's also going to be a bigger overarching story here, one that involves them discovering a Sith. Basically, it's going to be maybe what the Acolyte should have been or could have been. Anyway, problem is I'm kind of at an impasse when it comes to how far with the visuals I go or can go. I've done story videos before where I tend to use popular characters and I just sort of compile images of them together and all of that. If you've seen those old story videos of mine, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But using brand new characters, I obviously can't do that, and even though I'm not exactly a fan of it at all, I have considered using AI art to some extent, maybe a large extent for the project. I don't know, I'm open to suggestions, but I do want this new series to be a little more in terms of visuals and audio than the videos I've done like this in the past. But anyway, I think I'm done rambling for now. That's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this one. Are the Jedi the foundation of Star Wars that Disney needs to get right in order to maybe make things right with the franchise? Should they lean into more mythological aspects, or do you think more like Andor should be made? Or tell me what you think about my story idea, or ask a question for a future lightning response video by starting your comment off with "Hey Thor" and asking away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.